popular programs that were proposed by Republicans. Now, just to give you a few details about this plan, it's similar to what Bernie Sanders was campaigning on. It's a little different, so let me tell you how. The proposal, which Sanders is calling a Medicare for All Act of 2017, looks a lot like the plan Sanders touted as a presidential candidate. As the name implies, it envisions giving everybody living in the United States, including undocumented immigrants, an enhanced version of Medicare with virtually no out-of-pocket spending, as well as dental, vision, and hearing aid coverage. Now, here is how his proposal is a little different from what he proposed when he was running for office. In the new bill, Sanders calls for a 4-year transition period during which the newly improved Medicare would first insure all children and adults 55 or older, then expand gradually to cover all adults. Now, he hasn't specified exactly how the country would pay for this program. He has laid out a few suggestions, including a 4% increase in federal taxes for U.S. households. And I think that's reasonable considering how much U.S. households would save in healthcare costs. Now, of course, there are some Democrats who are on board. However, there are some Democrats who are not on board. And before I give you those names, I want to open it up to the panel. Ron, Jimmy, what are your thoughts?
Well, if it's first of all, there's all these people signing on to the bill, which I'm skeptical of because they all want to run for president, and to me it's like a head fake to the progressive base. And, it's good to see it happening, but I think it's like they've gotten the okay from their donors. You can sign on to a bill that we know will never pass. But as soon as that becomes close to passing, they're going to find problems with it, and things are wrong. Maybe I'm a cynic at this point. I've been watching the Democrats for so long now, so that's what I think. Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, I think this is a big head fake, and I think they got the okay from their donors. That's what I think.
See, I'm trying to say that I'm cautiously optimistic. I have my I share those concerns. I think a lot of folks do. But the other side of it is the fact that even if this is a political football, the fact that they're playing it is saying that they're finally in touch with the fact that most of the country wants this now. Mm-hmm. About 60% of adults want single-payer healthcare, and that's only going to grow. That's only going to keep up because people are finally seeing through the propaganda. And you see Bernie Sanders going into rural places, and you see these people cheering the idea of everybody having healthcare. That wasn't happening 10 years ago, but it's happening now.
Right, and I think it's because enough Americans have gone bankrupt due to healthcare costs, and enough Americans are frustrated about the fact that they pay way more for pharmaceutical drugs than other countries. So yeah, I think a lot of Bernie Sanders' popularity had to do with the fact that he actually did touch on the economic issues, including healthcare, that Americans were frustrated with, while other candidates refused to do so. But the one thing that I do want to touch on quickly, Jimmy, is, all of a sudden we are seeing some Democrats on board co-sponsoring this legislation. And these are Democrats that, historically were not on board for things that would benefit the American people, like lowering the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. So Cory Booker would be an example of that. He is co-sponsoring this legislation along with Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats. And remember, earlier this year, he voted against the reimportation of pharmaceutical drugs. Essentially, that would make pharmaceutical drugs much cheaper for Americans. And so Nomiki Konst, who is one of our, who works with us, managed to ask him about that. And here's what his answer was.
How is the balance of the pharmaceutical industry in your state with the provisions of Medicare?
Well, I think there's a lot of givens right now. And the biggest given is just any objective person can think to themselves, why is the exact same drug so much more expensive in this country than a few hundred miles north in Canada? And a lot of that has to do is that we don't have the power to negotiate down costs. It has to do with all the middle men and women that are profiteering off of this broken system we have. One of the biggest culprits was mentioned today, the PBMs. So having a system like this that can use the collective bargaining power that comes from having Medicare for all, as well as beginning to expose a lot of the other ways these prices are driven up, is going to help us drive it down. And by the way, this has to be just one component of a larger effort to drive down the costs of healthcare. All the areas in which there's profiteering going on. Why, when you look at your healthcare bills, you see aspirin sometimes costing, $4 a pill or something outrageous like that. So we have a lot of work to do to drive down healthcare costs. This is a very important step in the right direction.
So he's talking the talk.
Yes, he's talking the talk.
He is definitely talking the talk, and he again is co-sponsoring this proposal along with Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. And look, I don't blame you for being skeptical and a cynic, because we have seen some Democrats, a lot of Democrats, refuse to represent the best interests of the American people or even their base because of the way that they're being funded, right? And so pharmaceutical companies helped fund Cory Booker's campaigns for a while until he got the criticism for voting against the reimportation legislation, and then he decided to stop taking money from pharmaceutical companies.
He took a pause.
He took a pause.
He didn't
to be
stop.
fair, he didn't stop. He took a pause. But that's some action. Like, I don't want to be, I'm also skeptical. Believe me, I'm also skeptical. But I also believe that we as voters and we as outspoken progressives have more power than we realize. And we've been criticizing establishment Democrats very aggressively since this last election. And I think that it could work if we continue to hold their feet to the fire, right? So if he starts changing the lingo, moving forward, if he sees, oh wow, this actually could work, and my donors aren't going to like that, well then we continue holding his feet to the fire. That's what I think our game plan should be.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see that, and of course we don't want to create a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario where it's like, oh, you're saying, well, we don't believe you. But, I mean, Cory Booker in this particular case, yeah, you do have to proceed with caution. I mean, this is a guy, after he, casted that vote against the drug pricing bill, he took a lot of flack from it. This is not his first political football. His first one was when he, came out for a better drug policy, where he wanted to get pot legalized. Like, hey, guys, I'm cool with pot. Are we okay now? Are we cool, progressives? Look at my pink scarf. You got to proceed with caution with them. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the reason why I think I'm skeptical, bordering on cynical, is because I live in California, and the Democratic Party has a supermajority in California, and all the California Democrats run on single payer. Anthony Rendon says he's for single payer, and he's the Speaker of the House. And in California, turns out we ain't getting it. So that's why I'm skeptical. So even when the Democrats have a supermajority in a state like California, which is the bluest state, I think, in the nation, and they all say they're for single payer, they find a way to undermine it. Anthony Rendon's found a way to undermine it. So they're not, and Anthony Rendon, what I say is he says he's been for single payer since before Obamacare. And you've been for single payer since before Obamacare, and you still don't have a plan that you came up with, that you introduced, because you're the goddamn speaker. You're the leader of the Democrats, and you don't have a plan? You're saying the plan they presented to you is flawed? Where's your plan? You've been thinking about this for 10 years? You're the leader, and you don't have a plan? I smell bullshit.
Right.
So the question becomes, now what? So if the Cory Bookers and the Kamala Harrises and the Elizabeth Warrens are just feeding us what we want to hear, then we're smart enough to continue to listen to them. And then when they pull off what the supermajority in California is doing, so hey, you guys remember back in September when you guys said you're on board and you stood there with Bernie, and Bernie, by the way, is saying, I'm glad these guys are supporting me. Now what? Because we need someone.
We do.
The four of us aren't on the legislative process. We're not in Congress. We're not in the Senate. So we need someone to be there. So since they're there, let's keep talking to them, keep pushing them. Because then now the answer is what? What's left?
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry to jump in, but I just wanted to make a quick point. I agree with what Ron said, and I think that it's in regard to not creating a scenario where Democrats think damned if you do, damned if you don't. However, I think it's a delicate balance, right? We don't want to make it seem as though doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what you do, we are not on board with you. You can just screw off, right? But I also want to make sure that the very second they renege on their big promises, that's when we jump in, right? And we hold their feet to the fire. Like, we can't lose focus. And I think that happens often. I think politicians will say what people want to hear, and then people get complacent. You can't get complacent. You have to make sure that the second they renege on what they're saying and what they claim they're going to do, you actually criticize them.
Jimmy, I'm going to let you answer, I promise. And that's what I think is the next wave of this feel of a voting bloc. This younger voting bloc will continue to pay attention. They're used to this, the old way of going where they'll say it and everyone kind of forgets because then, it's football season and no one's going to be talking about it because their fantasy team is winning right now. So they can fly under the radar. Or they'll go, Trump keeps doing crazy things. So this will fly under the radar for me not to follow through. We will remember, it's a new age of getting more information. You don't have to watch cable news and read newspapers anymore. You can get it from wherever you want and you get it quicker and people can actually respond. So I think they're going to have to answer for more than what they used to have to.
So we'll see. Now they're going to have to go sell this to the country. I mean, Bernie Sanders and all the co-sponsors. So, one thing that also makes me skeptical is I saw the body language of, like, say, Kamala Harris when she announced that she was for Medicare for all. It was like she was almost apologizing. It's like, well, I'm going to be co-sponsoring. She was like, if you're for something that you know you're going to have to fight for, you have to come out for it. You have to say, that's why we need Medicare for all, and that's why She didn't say it like that. She said it like, this would be a surprise to my staff. Why is this a surprise to your staff? When your staff doesn't know where you stand on the most important progressive issue of our day, you're going to let us know. So that's why. So I'm not trying again. It's good that this is happening. This is only happening because we put pressure on them, man.
Yes.
This is only happening because people did not let up and people didn't fall in line. That's why this is happening. And then you're right. We have to keep the pressure on. So what really matters is how they vote. Cory Booker knows exactly what to say. He knows how to pay fealty to progressives. He knows how to talk like a populist, but then he voted against the reimportation of the drugs from Canada. So we have to watch how they vote.
Watch how they vote, and then the other cautionary thing that we do have to keep an eye on is the type of verbiage that they use. When they say words like access, we want them to have access.
Yeah.
I have access to a BMW, technically, right? But so you have to be wary of stuff like that. And even Cory Booker, in a lot of his statements, was using those types of verbiage, which would later allow them to deflect on it at a later time
so
where it's not as
ridiculous.
convenient for them to take the
Yeah, in fact, his exact verbiage when he came out and said he was co-sponsoring was he says we have to make sure we have access to affordable health care. That's not Medicare.
Right.
Medicare is health care. It doesn't. There's no Ford to it. It's just it's already paid for. It's waiting for you. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, just very quickly, I do want to list off the Democratic senators who are on board with this. Let's go to graphic 5B, please. So, as we mentioned, Cory Booker has signed on to it. There's also Kristen Gillibrand from New York, Kamala Harris from California, Elizabeth Warren, Patrick Leahy, Sheldon Whitehouse, Al Franken, Jeff Merkley, Ed Markey, Martin Heinrich, Tom Udall, Brian Schatz, Maisie Hirono, also Richard Blumenthal, Jeanne Shaheen, and Tammy Baldwin. So we do have some Democrats on board. That's the good news. And again, let's hold their feet to the fire. But also keep in mind that there are Democrats, particularly Democratic leadership in Congress, who is not on board. And so I want to talk about that briefly. Let's go to graphic 1. Now, among the Democrats who are not on board with Bernie Sanders' single-payer health care proposal are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and more. Let's hear from them. According to The Hill, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi on Tuesday previewed the much-anticipated release of Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill by taking the notable step of refusing to throw their weight behind it. Nancy Pelosi said, "Right now, I'm protecting the Affordable Care Act." The Affordable Care Act, which, look, it's better than the system we had before, but Americans are understandably frustrated with it because it falls short. And so to say, yeah, I'm going to ignore this because I'm just much more interested in the political benefits, she thinks there are political benefits of supporting and protecting the Affordable Care Act, I think shows just how tone-deaf she is. Also, Chuck Schumer says Democrats believe that health care is a right for all, and there are many different bills out there. Okay. So what do you support? And I mean, we know the answer. He is not supporting what Bernie Sanders is trying to do. Also, we have a statement from Steny Hoyer. He says there are things in the Affordable Care Act that aren't working as well as they should. The first objective that both Leader Pelosi and I have is to preserve the Affordable Care Act and to adopt policies that will make it work better. That's our first priority. You've had quite a bit of time to make it work better. But they haven't really done much to change it. Now, of course, Republicans have had quite a bit of control as of late, but remember, when Obama got elected into office, he had a majority in the House and the Senate. You guys could have had a much better plan, and you didn't. You didn't. And there's a reason for that. And so, look, these are the lawmakers who claim that they want to look out for the best interests of the country. They want to make sure that everyone is covered and safe and doesn't have to go bankrupt over a medical emergency. But talk is cheap, and they need to actually take real action. And look, I think the most frustrating part about this is like their inability to admit that they failed, right? There's a reason why this past election ended up the way that it did, and they're so incredibly defiant about it. Anyway.
So I would just pick up on what you said is the reason why this last election turned out the way it was, it was because when they did elect a Democrat, we did elect the Democrats to be the president, the Senate, and the House. Democrats had a supermajority. Let's remember, they had a supermajority, and we still got a right-wing giveaway corporate guilt to the healthcare industry anyway. That's what they gave us. We had a complete supermajority, and they still gave us the right-wing healthcare plan. So it doesn't matter. That's why that's why I'm cynical right now. That's why I don't take them at their face value. Barack Obama ran on single payer. We didn't even get a goddamn public option. And who did he go? By the way, the guy standing up for the public option was Dennis Kucinich. And you know what Barack Obama did? He went to his district and campaigned against Dennis Kucinich because he wouldn't go along with that healthcare bill without a public option. That's what Barack Obama did. Instead of going to Ben Nelson's or going to Joe Lieberman's district, instead of going to their states and trying to screw those people over, he went to the guy standing up for people and screwed him over. That's what corporate Democrats do, and that's why we're skeptical of this.
Well, and let's be honest here. Political benefits in Nancy Pelosi's world and Chuck Schumer's world and many bills out there, that's all code for we want to keep the insurance industry happy. We want to make sure they're still at the table. And for single payer to work, they can't be at the table. They got to go bye-bye, and that's not very donor-friendly.
It's just it just shows how out of touch they are. And while they enjoy the best healthcare insurance in the country that's paid by American taxpayers, right? Yes. While they don't have to worry about going bankrupt over a medical emergency, they have the audacity to fight to keep a system that isn't working in place. Now, again, the Affordable Care Act has positive components to it, and we have supported those components, but it's also not a system that's currently working for a lot of Americans. And so it's just the frustration that I think a lot of Americans feel over the fact that they are completely disconnected from what most Americans are going through, and they're elected to represent us. That's the crazy part.
Well, first of all, Nancy Pelosi's worth over $100 million, so I understand why she doesn't understand someone who can't afford their own medicine or doesn't go to a doctor because they can't afford the copay. So she doesn't. So no, she doesn't get any of that stuff. There's a little bug in there. But here's what she said. She's defending the Affordable Care Act, meaning Obamacare. Mm-hmm. Do you know the Affordable Care Act leaves out 28 million people, Nancy Pelosi? Is that really the plan you want us to? Do you know that a lot of people say one of the reasons why Hillary Clinton lost and we have Donald Trump is because that premiums on Obamacare went up 25% a month before the election because there's no cost controls on that, and you guys let it happen anyway. You didn't do Barack Obama just let that happen, and he didn't think it was going to be a repercussion. There was a repercussion, and now we got Trump. No cost controls in Obamacare, 28 million people left out, and that's the plan Nancy Pelosi's championing. She sounds like a Republican. You know why? Because she is.
Yeah. And remember, the mandate was supposed to be a cost control, but it wasn't enough, right? I mean, if you mandate Americans to buy private health insurance, but don't tell private health insurance companies that they can't raise their prices to ridiculous amounts, well then, what do you think these private industries are going to do? They're going to raise the prices, right? Because what's the consequence of doing so? There are none. Anyway, all right, we got to take a quick break. Let's do that, and when we come back, how politicians are politicizing what's going on with these storms in Houston and Florida, and then later on we will dig right into that ESPN story, which is incredible. Stick around.
I got a bunch of things to go through.
No Republican would have ever voted for Bernie. He would have done worse than Hillary Clinton.
They're so miserable. All right, I'm gonna stop myself. Well, I say things that are offensive.
If I ran for office, and that would be a trippy day, right? I'd break even more rules than Trump. If I had all the money in the world, I would enjoy that. We have a great show for you. Steve's answer is C. Dave's is A, and the correct answer is, of course, B. These guys are the worst. Here's the story, and it's not funny. It was over too.
It seems just comically unfair and ridiculous. The Democratic Party just sucks right now. It just sucks because it doesn't know what it stands for. We should call it right.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
And I'm reading some of the comments on a YouTube video I did. What the cuck? Go.
And then the other thing he did, which I did get.
Well, wait a minute. What was the secret?
I don't know what the secret is. I've never heard the secret. The secret is you got to spend $20 to buy the book.
We don't know what the secret is. Okay.
But the other thing he did, I got a kick out of, was when he left, when he made the decision not to renew, based on the contract they were giving him. Apparently, he sent them he on the internet wrote that he wishes the WWE the best in their future endeavors, which I did get a kick out of.
Well, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I've said CM Punk is my hero because he said basically, "Fuck you, I'm going home, and there's nothing you can do about it," and I've got the wherewithal to do so, and I enjoy that when the boys can leave under their own terms. But it helps when one of the boys was actually a big fucking draw and was a talent, and stuck it to him rather than. Oh, well, anyway, another case of one of these guys they let into fucking business that wasn't ready for it and didn't deserve it. I don't know. Which is bullshit for a company that size, and they, besides the fact they have no insurance, no benefits, and all that stuff, they get a plane ticket, but they have to pay their own hotel, rental car, food on the road. And to be honest, like I said, for a company that size, that's bullshit. But here's another, Ryback said, well, after the taxes, because he said he pays 40% in taxes off the top, and if he does, his accountant is fucking an idiot, and he ought to be fired. Because there's all kinds of ways that you can put money aside where you can defer taxes, and also, and I'm not going to sit here and be a financial advisor. You're the Jew. You ought to be doing that line of work. See, I can talk that way to you because we're friends.
Semite.
Yeah. Tell your story walking. But also, here's what Ryback said. He said he spends $150,000 a year on his road expenses. Now, let's just do some fucking math here, shall we? Because they only work 4 days a week. If you're booked full-time every week, all the time, you only work 4 days a week anymore. Nobody works 7 days a week anymore like we used to. So, for 4 days a week, and that means you're flying back the next day, so you're on the road 4.5 to 5 days a week by the time that you get done with it. But that means, let's say he's on the road 5 days a week. $150,000 a year. That means he's spending $3,000 per week on travel expenses. That means that he's spending
welcome back to TYT. I want to read some TYT lives for you. By the way, I'm joined today by Ron Flacone and Jimmy Dore. Jank is gone today. I don't know where, but he will be back tomorrow.
He's getting his sweat ducts uncleared.
Okay, so
Flushed out.
So I have some TYT lives for you, but I did just quickly check my Instagram, and someone wrote a really nice comment that I wanted to share and answer your question. And I really like the lacy blazer you're wearing today. Where did you get it? I don't even know the brand. The person who last took photos of me had this incredible stylist who had this blazer, and I was like, I want it. Can I have it? Can I buy it? And I bought it off of him. But I'll
with no brand on it. Oh, I see a brand name.
It is. I haven't taken the Couples. The Couples. I've never heard of this brand in my life, but anyway.
Oh, nice jacket. I would say so too.
Thank you. It's funny because I was a little like iffy on it because I feel like I don't know. I feel like blazers look bad on me on camera. Anyway, Andrew says the answer is simple: primary their asses and replace them with real progressives. Talking about some of the establishment Democrats who did co-sponsor Bernie's legislation. Jeff Waldorf says Harris was apologizing to her donors, buttressing off of Jimmy's point about how Kamala Harris is not really being genuine about co-sponsoring that legislation. And your mama says, I'm with Jimmy that I have no faith in these establishment politicians signing on for Medicare for all. We must hold them to account. So a lot of agreement there. All right, guys, let's move on to the aftermath of the hurricanes and some political points that are being brought up. Oftentimes, after a national tragedy hits, politicians are told that they shouldn't exploit that tragedy for political reasons, although it happens all the time. And the recent example is Donald Trump trying to push for his tax cuts by using Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma as examples of why these tax cuts are necessary. Now, keep in mind that there are a number of government agencies and programs who have spent a considerable amount of resources and time to help provide relief to victims of these storms, and that takes money. It takes taxpayer money, which is why it's a curious argument made by Trump that these tax cuts would actually help Americans when it comes to these types of tragedies. So in a recent tweet, he wrote, with Irma and Harvey devastation, tax cuts and tax reform is needed more than ever before. Go Congress, go.
And he probably pushed a red button right after he tweeted that. Just go.
Go Congress, go.
So this is how it works?
Yeah.
I'm president.
Like, people are really suffering in the aftermath of the storm, and they need resources, and they need the government to come to their aid. So let's cut taxes so we won't have the resources to help them out. Anyway, he also, just to give you some numbers on how disastrous this has been, let's go to graphic 8. The two storms caused a combined $150 to $200 billion in damages, and that's according to a preliminary estimate from Moody's Analytics this week. And also keep in mind that Trump didn't use this storm to push a political agenda once. He did so several times. Here's another example. Trump made the same case during a cabinet meeting at Camp David on Saturday, held just as Irma was bearing down on Florida. So look, he is somehow politicizing this storm to support his proposal to cut taxes on the wealthy. And in some cases, I think it makes sense to use a crisis or a tragedy to make a point, a political point. I think Democrats have a really good opportunity here to talk about the impact of climate change and how these storms will become more severe and will happen more often if we don't do something to cut carbon emissions. They're not doing that, though. But Trump, on the other hand, is like, yeah, cutting taxes is actually going to hurt relief efforts, so let me go ahead and exploit these storms to cut taxes.
Wouldn't it be great if the Democrats actually did fight for the stuff they believed in, or they claim to believe in? Wouldn't that be something like if we did see something, a huge tragedy, and they go, this is why we need single-payer Medicare. We need it right now. This is why, because they don't do that, though. Wouldn't it be great to see after a big this Category 4 hurricane, the second one in 2 weeks to hit our country. They go, this is when we got to do something about climate. Wouldn't it be great to see them come out and do that? Hey, maybe when the economy crashed, maybe they would say, hey, now we got to break up the banks. Wouldn't it be great to see them actually believe in stuff and push for it in a time of crisis? That would be amazing. It's never happening because the Democrats are also beholden to their donors, which is why they can't ever stand up for anything.
Yeah, like, look, if I feel like usually when something terrible happens, common sense says, all right, so this terrible thing just happened. What can I do to mitigate it in the future? What can I do to solve this problem or prevent it from happening in the future? And for some reason, like, if Democrats try to find solutions as soon as a tragedy strikes, they're immediately criticized as politicizing that tragedy, and then they tuck tail and they're like, yeah, you're right, I don't want to politicize it. And it's like, either you're incredibly weak and you're so afraid of criticism that you won't do anything, or you just never really believed in these political issues that you claim to support to begin with, right? And both of those are terrible.
Well, I think that's part of what's wrong with our society. When you have something like a natural disaster and you kind of say, okay, we really need to address climate change now, you're not politicizing anything. You're talking about a worthy cause that is 100% necessary for the planet.
Absolutely.
That's what climate change is, a cause that is necessary for the survival of the planet. Trying to use a natural disaster as a reason for corporate tax breaks is a ridiculous claim that involves so much mental gymnastics it would take 12 Ayn Rand novels to justify.
Right, so to your point, I want to give you guys some stats, because who knows, maybe you're thinking, oh, look at these libs. They're just generalizing, and they're just, speculating. What are the facts? What
Look
are the
at their
details?
peer-reviewed science, like
Right.
they have a book or something.
So we'll get to the climate science in just a second, but I actually want to focus on what these tax cuts for the wealthy will actually do to these government agencies that provide relief to storm victims, okay? So first, here's what Trump proposes when it comes to taxes. Trump's tax vision would provide the 400 highest income taxpayers in the country with an average tax cut of $15 million per year, because, that's what they need. The total tax cut for this group alone is $6 billion. For the same cost, the government could provide 600,000 low-income families with housing vouchers that could help them afford decent, stable housing. But why would we want to do that? It's much nicer to build moats around our estates and have the poor living on the street and struggling with their children. Anyway, let's get to how this would impact, hurricane response. Now, Trump's budget proposal would lead to some funding cuts, right? So $876 million in cuts for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's disaster relief account, $200 million in cuts for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration programs, $2.6 billion in cuts for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and $1.3 billion in cuts for the Coast Guard, which has done quite a bit of important work for the victims of Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. And so, how are tax cuts going to help these people? Please share that information with us. And you're right, the mental gymnastics. People do it. Somehow, miraculously, the people who benefit from these programs the most, the people who need these programs the most, will somehow drink that conservative Kool-Aid and think, oh yeah, you know what? I'm struggling to put food on the table, but I want those tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the country, so then I can be completely screwed over when a terrible storm hits, which has been exacerbated by climate change, and there's no resources to help me and my family out. That makes all the sense in the world. Continue voting for Trump, please.
Well, actually, I thought about it, and there actually is one way that this plan would make sense. If every single rich person in the world behaved like Harrison Ford, maybe these tax cuts would be okay, because then in that case, they would all use their tax breaks to buy helicopters and rescue a bunch of people devastated by the hurricane. But otherwise, it's bullshit.
And look, Jordan French, who's a longtime viewer of the show, made a point to me recently about how there are a lot of churches and religious organizations that provide aid, and that's awesome. But I don't want to live in a society where I rely solely on religious organizations, especially considering some of those religious organizations that have been in the news lately and how comfortable they are discriminating against certain groups of people. So if you're a gay individual and you need help, is a church going to help you if they're against, the gay lifestyle. Like, I don't want to get into a situation where we are completely reliant on people volunteering to help. We need to ensure that we have a system in place to provide security and safety for people once tragedy strikes.
This idea that people have in their head that, well, if government didn't do it, we just have charities do it. We had charities in this country since we started. There's a reason why we had to institute Medicare. You know why? Because when people would quit working, they would go into poverty and die without medicine because they couldn't afford their medicine. That's why we have Medicare. Before Medicare was instituted, there was 33% poverty rate among senior citizens. A decade later, it was 11%. You think churches could have done that? We had churches back then. We had synagogues. We had mosques. We had everything back then. But we still had 33% of senior citizens living in poverty. So this idea that people have that, well, why don't we just let the churches do it? Why don't we let private charities do it? They don't freaking do it. We have the richest country in the world the face of the earth has ever seen. We can take care of everybody a million times over. But as Jack Ma has said, the guy who runs the Amazon of Asia, it's not China that's screwing over our economy. It's us that screws over our economy because we don't know how to distribute our income. We have more wealth in America than we had 10 years ago, than we had 5 years ago, and people are poorer. Why? Because we have a failed system. What do you call a system that takes the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen and renders half of its people poor or low income? That's a failed system. So this idea that somehow the church is going to fix that system is fucking bullshit that you've swallowed. Turn off your AM radio.
So, I just want to quickly clarify that, Jordan didn't say, get rid of these government programs. He was just quickly making a point about how churches do step up and they do provide relief, and that was all he said. So I don't want to throw him under.
I'm not going. I'm saying like the bigger picture,
right.
not this.
The broader argument that's made by the
broader argument that's made.
That argument is made, and it is.
You know what? Also, Ron, didn't we talk this week about how much money that each church would have to raise to make up for these cuts? It was like $700,000. Can you believe that? That's how much each religious organization, that's every synagogue, every mosque, every Christian church would have to raise $700,000. You think that's happening? You got a guy, Joel Osteen, wouldn't even open up his goddamn church for 5 seconds for flood victims. You think every church and synagogue in the country is going to raise $700,000 so it can go to the poor? That's not happening. That's why we have government. Government is us. Okay, I'll stop talking.
All right, and then just very quickly to the point regarding Democrats refusing to take this opportunity to make important points about climate change, I'll give you a couple examples, okay? So, Politico recently wrote about this, and they named specific Democrats who were like, we can't make this issue political. Senator Tom Carper, who is apparently very afraid of this, said the silence was part of the party's overall strategy, Politico characterized as keeping the climate politics to a minimum after the hurricanes. Also keep in mind that EPA administrator, unsurprisingly, is pushing the ridiculous idea that somehow for anyone, including scientists, to talk about the cause and effect of these storms during Irma is very, very insensitive to the people of Florida. And apparently some Democrats have signed on to that. They appear to be heeding the warnings of climate science denier Pruitt. Politico quotes climate hawk Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, saying there's no urgency to make the climate hurricane link. We have a lot of time to make that point. Yeah, you've had a lot of time to make that point.
Unbelievable.
Okay, and look, he's a climate hawk. Make the point. Make the point incessantly. Get something done. You have to the next one.
Let's give it a few more. Then we'll jump in.
So this idea to not make the hurricane political, I'm going to tell you something. This is true. I'm going to tell you something. Everything is political. Nothing is not political. If you go, well, I'm choosing to not make this political, that's a political decision.
That's right.
So when you say, I don't want to politicize climate change, you're saying, I'm not politicizing climate change on purpose. So we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to fix this problem. When you say we're not going to politicize it, you mean we're not going to talk about the problems that are connected to this, which means that's a decision. You're being political. To not talk about something is a political action. So when you don't make something political, what you're doing is shoring up the status quo. You're keeping the status quo in place. That's a political act. That's why Hillary Clinton lost, because she was there to guard the status quo. And so when you say you don't want to make something political, that's bullshit. Everything is political.
All right, we will leave you with that before we go to break. When we come back, though, an incredible story involving motels that are working with ICE to get people deported. It's disgusting. And then the ESPN story that I've been teasing you about all hour long. That and more when we come back.
I have 5 minutes. Explain the Facebook. Go.
Aaron Wysocki, the commander of the Armies of the East.
So for those who don't know, Aaron is actually Jank's favorite employee. Aaron, what do you like better? The rabies or the rabies? Go. Aaron, I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live. Go. Hi, Aaron. I'm confused. Is it Cenk Weiger or Cenk Uger? Go.
What I think a lot of people at TYT, and certainly in the audience, don't know is that without Aaron, none of this happened.
It's all because of me.
So, Aaron, what would you do to surface the Young Turks, as they say?
Well, the first thing I did around that is we didn't have a video podcast back in those days. It was only a audio version, and I wanted I wanted to watch it at work in video form, so I just created the video podcast. So this is the free version of the video podcast that still exists today. I created that from scratch. So I would take the YouTube clip and rip it illegally back then off of YouTube and just put it up on iTunes.
What were the things you did to popularize the Young Turks? And
So one of the very early things that I liked was not necessarily the show, it was Jank's blogs. I really enjoyed reading those blogs, and I wanted to share them as widely as possible. So at the time, there was a big wave of what they called social bookmarking back then. And so what it meant was like you pull links from, this is Reddit, what Reddit is today. It was much more popular back then, and there were many different websites.
It wasn't until just a couple years ago when Jank and I were traveling together, we would share a hotel room.
Yeah.
2 grown men sharing a little hotel room. I was like, how much longer do we have to do this?
You're going to be in there much longer?
No, seriously. I'm like, oh, geez, he's in the bathroom again. So I have to go downstairs and use the lobby bathroom. Like that kind of stuff. Like that's the kind of family that we had, right? I mean, but I think
that was such a smart decision, though, because you know what it did? You found people that were dedicated to the company, and in a startup, in those early days, you need to find people like that.
Absolutely.
One, two, three, four.
There's always these weird cream cheese options. I can never just find the plain. What about salmon? Do I look like a grizzly bear? Here, try this veggie. Here's the plain. Where is it? You're more of a grape drink kind of guy, right? Or try this mouthwash. Where's the plain? Do you like sexual healing? Where is the plain? Where's the plain? Where's the plain? Where is it? Where's the plain? Dude. Anna Rasparian. No, I want the plane. Supervisor! Aren't you the supervisor? Isn't the whole point of being supervisor? Why do you get to decide my cream cheese options? At what point did you decide there'd be no plain cream cheese? I don't understand. Take it easy, man. No, this is true just like with politics and anything else. If we don't stand up for ourselves, they're just gonna fuck us even harder. You're not gonna believe this. They kicked me out of the kitchen.
I got my eye on a place that's beyond me.
guys, welcome back to TYT. Joe Howard writes in and says, we can't talk about climate change in the wake of hurricanes, but Trump can use devastation to justify tax cuts. Republican PC culture. Yeah, it's frustrating. And it doesn't even make sense. That's the thing.
Let's focus on the real victims. Rich people.
Yep.
Got it rough. One day they'll get a break. One of these days.
So during I'm doing a TYT interview today with Jonathan Larson, who is the news editor here at TYT, and they are going to roll out a really great project that I think is going to highlight this issue that we talk about a lot: how tax cuts do not create jobs. In fact, the more you give tax cuts to these corporations, they actually consolidate their companies, they lay people off, they use more automation for some of the positions, and they're going to focus on one corporation after the other to give you specific examples. And so don't miss that TYT interview. I am doing it tonight, and there's just a lot of great tidbits that will come out of that investigative series that we're going to be doing. And it's because of you, the viewers, who have helped support us, and you've helped fund the investigative reporting team here at TYT. All right, let's move on to some more news. There are 2 Motel 6 locations in Phoenix, Arizona that are apparently sharing their guest lists with ICE officials in an effort to help them deport undocumented immigrants. That's happening. Now, the 2 Motel 6 locations in Phoenix are reportedly sending guest lists to ICE officials on a daily basis. By the way, without even notifying their patrons about the fact that they are sending these individuals' info to federal officials. Now, one of the workers there was very forthcoming about this, apparently, and said, we send a report every morning to ICE, all the names of everybody that comes in. Every morning at about 5 o'clock, we do the audit, and we push a button, and it sends it to ICE. Classy. Very, very classy. So,
how did this come out? How did people find out about this? Do you know?
I actually don't know how this was reported, but there was a local publication in Phoenix that did an investigation, and they found the info about what was going on.
Yeah, there's a couple of immigration attorneys. One of their clients was one of the people that was caught up in one of these sweeps. They must have gone to the...
It's a good point. Right. So that person, last name Maldonado, said... So he found out that his info was given because ICE officials had done what's called like a knock. What is it called? The knock and talk, where they just show up and they knock and without a warrant, and people will be like, okay, fine, I guess you can come in and ask me questions. They'll come in and ask questions, and Maldonado realized that this is way too much of a coincidence. Let me give you his exact statement. He says that the ICE was following a lead when they encountered one of Maldonado's clients, but the fact that they had his exact room number when he was only staying there one night was too much of a coincidence. Maldonado believes ICE compares the guest list with warrant lists to find individuals who are undocumented. And so because of what these 2 Motel 6 places are doing in Phoenix, there have been at least 20 arrests at these 2 locations between February and August of this year. And about a third of the cases indicated that ICE encountered a suspect during a knock and talk, where an officer show up without a warrant and ask permission to enter the room. Then they go ahead and they ask a bunch of questions, and it will either result in an arrest or not. And so it's something that you guys should be aware of. We have, establishments that are now giving lists of their patrons to ICE officials, and then ICE officials go ahead and show up, knock on your door without a warrant, and ask you questions and possibly arrest you if they suspect that you're an undocumented immigrant.
Wow. So why would they do that to the Jews? I mean, the undocumented. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds the exact same thing. Yeah, we're going to tell the SS that you're here. We're going to send a list of people. We got Jews at my hotel. So let everybody know. That's disgusting. Yeah. And so, people so the whole thing about, well, Trump's a white supremacist, and, it couldn't work without a bunch of people going along with him, right? Mm-hmm. And so here's a corporation that's good, because those aren't franchises. Those aren't privately owned. That's owned by the corporation, those hotels. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge corporation going along with Trump's, whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a good reminder. By the way,
But by the way, even if you're not undocumented and you're not concerned about being deported, are you comfortable with it doesn't matter who you are, your information is handed over to ICE officials. Are you comfortable with that? Do you think that's okay?
Are you comfortable where you go to patronize a business and they think, well, maybe what if you have a warrant? I'll let the cops know you're here. What the F is going on? That is big
government, by the way. You want to have a conversation about big government? That's big government.
That's big government. And the conservatives are supposed to hate that shit, right?
They love it. They love it. They love big government when it has to do with regulating vaginas and when it has to do with regulating,
or discriminating against someone or hurting someone who's poor and has no power.
That's right.
Yeah, they don't mind the surveillance state when it comes to either promoting war or getting rid of brown people that they don't want around. Because, I mean, this whole thing, it is not only completely disrespectful to any and all patrons, but it's just straight up racist.
Yeah,
and it's disrespectful to the idea of America, right? And first of all, I know we live in a surveillance state, right? So this is all just lip service to liberty because we don't have liberty in America, and this is another proof. We need a revolution.
We do. And one final point that I want to make: I will never ever check into a Motel 6 in Phoenix. Never. Okay? They don't have, I never would anyway, but mostly because I don't really feel like going to Phoenix. But I'm just kidding. Phoenix is fine, I guess, maybe. But I'm certainly not interested in going to a hotel or a motel that is now on the record claiming that they're totally fine with giving patrons information to federal agents.
Well, I don't think I'll go to a Motel 6 in general ever again. I mean, I lived on the road for 5 years, so I've been to many Motel 6s. I'm pretty uncomfortable with the idea of them sharing that information whenever. I'd be more uncomfortable if they shared what I did while I was there, but that's a different story for a different day. But yeah, I mean, this is a very unethical practice from a huge franchise.
It is, but they will leave the lights on for you.
They will. They will lights on, so it's easy for the cops to catch you. I go to a Super 8 if you have the option. Super 8's a much nicer hotel. It's usually just as inexpensive. It's much better than Motel 6. It's true.
Nice. Yeah. I was going to make a comment about Howard Johnson's, but it's unnecessary.
Hey, watch your mouth.
Howard Johnson.
What does his Johnson have anything to do with this?
Okay, let's just move on. All right. Skipping ahead to the ESPN story. Yes. There might be some disagreement here, which is good. I like disagreement. All right. SportsCenter anchor Jemele Hill from ESPN is facing quite a bit of backlash from conservatives after she made her feelings about Trump very well known on Twitter. So Monday night, she got into a little bit of a Twitter tiff with an individual who apparently was supportive of Kid Rock. The conversation began with a conversation with a statement regarding Kid Rock and how frustrated he is that people think he's racist because he says racist things. And so Jemele Hill responded to this individual by saying the following: Donald Trump is a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists. She continued to tweet that Trump is the most ignorant, offensive president of my lifetime. His rise is a direct result of white supremacy, period. And another tweet said that Donald Trump is a bigot. Glad you could live with voting for him. I couldn't because I cared about more than just myself. Now, this led to a bunch of people who were very, very hurt, very offended that she would have the audacity to speak her mind and tell the truth about Donald Trump on Twitter. And so ESPN responded with this following statement. Let's take a look. The comments on Twitter from Jemele Hill regarding the president do not represent the position of ESPN. We have addressed this with Jemele, and she recognizes her actions were inappropriate. So as far as we know at the moment, that was the extent of the consequences that Jemele Hill faced. A little bit of a slap on the wrist, if you will, on Twitter. And that further infuriated conservatives because they felt that it was unfair treatment compared to other hosts on ESPN who were either suspended or fired because of their political statements. These were conservatives who made some political statements, and we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do so, what do you guys think about what she had to say on Twitter? Was that deeply offensive? and should she lose her job as a
Deeply
result?
offensive. That's funny to say. She deeply offended the people who are committed to hate of other people with different. That's what that sounds like. So
She sounded really intolerant of intolerance.
yes, that's
It was very intolerant.
So when you Donald Trump has made no secret of his affection for white supremacists, neo-Nazis, alt whatever. So he's made it no secret.
He has made it no secret. In fact, we have some evidence of that, okay? Here is a video montage of Trump's reactions after the hate rally in Charlottesville, where a 31-year-old woman by the name of Heather Heyer was run over by a white supremacist. Take a look.
This egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. Define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying, as
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at me? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit. Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. Excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. You're changing history, you're changing culture.
Okay. Now, couple that with the statements he made about Mexicans being rapists and criminals.
And the Mexican judge couldn't be a good judge because he was
Mexican
Mexican.
judge could
Muslims who
the
were cheering.
Muslim ban. I mean, it just on and on and on. I mean, referring to Muslim, generalizing about Muslims being terrorists, wanting to build a wall. Early on in his campaign, refusing to condemn David Duke, who was a KKK leader who supported him. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So what part of Hill's statement was offensive? Was it the truth?
Yes.
Did the truth hurt your feelings?
Yes.
Because here's the reality. He is a white supremacist. If that offends you, then maybe you should reconsider your support of Donald Trump. Right?
Well, and we can go way beyond when he was like on the campaign trail. I mean, we can go back to when the discriminatory housing practices.
Right.
We can go back to when he called for the heads of 5 black guys that did not commit the murder, that were innocent.
And never apologized.
He never apologized for it. Still stands by what he did.
Yeah. He called for their execution.
What about him chasing the president around, asking for his birth certificate?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes on and on. So if you are offended by Jamil Hill calling him a white supremacist, you need to really reevaluate who you're supporting. Because the reality is you are supporting a white supremacist. If the truth hurts, then you can continue trying to live under a rock. But this is the reality of the situation. Now, let me give you, what some believe is a double standard. There's this criticism that ESPN is a liberal outlet. They're such lefties that they will punish conservative individuals who work for the channel, but they won't, really punish people like Jamil Hill. So let's hear from one person. Sean Davis says, Kurt Schilling, great athlete. Linda Cohn, successful broadcaster. Jamil Hill, bad at her job, but hates Trump. Guess who's still on air? Another person says that didn't Kurt Schilling get run out of town for a meme? Yes, he did get run out of town for a meme. So let's first of all take a quick look at that meme. This was a baseball analyst on on ESPN who ended up getting suspended, and this is the meme that he shared on Facebook, showing his version of a transgender individual and chiming in with commentary about allowing transgender individuals to use the bathroom that they identify with. So that image, that's not the truth, okay? That image is making a generalization about an entire population of people, but that wasn't his first offense. Kurt Schilling got in trouble quite a few times with ESPN. Let's give you graphic 33. For instance, in 2015, Schilling was suspended from the network for posting a meme to Twitter comparing Muslim extremists to Nazis. Schilling later apologized for the tweet and called it a bad decision and 100% my fault. 6 months later, Schilling said during an interview that then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton should be, quote, buried under a jail somewhere in reference to her email scandal. Just 1 month later, Schilling was fired. when he shared, sorry, he was fired, not suspended, just to correct myself, when he shared a Facebook post in response to the North Carolina law that bars transgender people from using bathrooms that do not correspond to their gender of birth. He was warned repeatedly by ESPN that he could not continue with these political statements, especially considering the fact that they were defamatory, that they were actually offensive and not grounded in truth. And he did not listen. And so, yeah, he got fired. So comparing Jameel Hill to Schilling is ridiculous, to say the least. You can't equate the two, but they will. They'll continue to equate the two. And you know what, conservatives, you don't like ESPN, you think it's a liberal station, then don't watch ESPN. Move on with your life.
Well, and this goes into something, I mean, the media can't be passive. I mean, the year is 2017 in the contemporary United States. We are actually fighting Nazis, and no, this is not an Indiana Jones movie, this is real life. We can't be passive with terms anymore. Trump didn't say something controversial. Trump said something racist. In other countries, when they have fringe politicians that subscribe to hate ideology, they identify it as such. They will say anti-Semitic candidate X or whatever the descriptor is. In the United States, we don't do that because we have a for-profit corporate media that thrives on access. But, maybe it's time we start. It's too bad that it's someone in the sports arena that's actually doing it, but I have no problem with it.
The thing, you should be proud of who you're supporting, as far as if you're supporting this guy as your president. So when the Trayvon Martin thing went down, and President Obama came out openly, explicitly said, Trayvon could have been my son. He supported the people that were outraged about this murder. So if someone then came to me and they said, hey, your president supports the people that are outraged about Trayvon Martin, I'd say, yes, I agree, he does. So when your president steps out and supports white supremacy and neo-Nazis, be proud of that.
Yes.
He openly and explicitly supported who you wanted him to support. So agree with him. What are you embarrassed about your position for?
Right.
I'm not embarrassed that President Obama supported the people that were mad about what happened with Trayvon Martin. I'm not embarrassed about that at all. So if you say, I can't believe it, or someone from ESPN decides to tweet and say, hey, you know what? President Obama, I can't believe he supported Trayvon Martin. I was like, crazy, you can't believe it. I agree, he did. It's just the truth. So don't get mad when she says what it is your president does. That's all it was. And she's disgusted by it. Okay, maybe if you're disgusted that Obama supported Trayvon Martin, then okay.
Yeah.
I know who you are.
And also, the people calling for her to get fired. I mean, those are the people that crack me up the most, because these are also the exact same people that throw feces as soon as they hear about Berkeley protesting a conservative speaker, because it's free speech, right? You want to hear differing perspectives, right? You don't want to shut people up just because you disagree with their political perspective, right? Right? No. It's all disingenuous bullshit, and you see it over and over again.
That's funny.
And so, look, I
never even thought about that.
Again, what Jameel Hill said was the truth, and there's evidence to back it up, okay? She didn't say something incredibly offensive and not grounded in truth about a specific community of people. She's not being defamatory. She's not doing anything that's objectionable to anyone that has any common sense. And so if it offends you, again, if the truth offends you, you have to ask yourself why, okay? Are you in complete denial over who Trump really is? And if you are, then educate yourself, because that's what the reality is. He ran on a campaign that focused primarily on dividing people, on pitting the least powerful people in this country against one another over racism and bigotry and hate. And he did it over and over again. And guess what? The more he did it, the more his supporters loved him. And finally, I want to leave you with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She was asked about this whole controversy. Here's what she had to say.
Donald Trump's a white supremacist who has largely surrounded himself with other white supremacists. His rise is a direct result of white supremacy, period. He's unqualified and fit to be president. Why do you think, do you have a reaction to that? Is the president aware of that comment? And
I'm not sure if he's aware, but I think that's one of the more outrageous comments that anyone could make, and certainly something that I think is a fireable offense by ESPN.
Yeah, outrageous comment.
Outrageous.
Hold on 1 second while I give you more justifications and excuses for his Muslim ban. Anyway, all right, we got to take a break. Thank you to Ron Placone and also Jimmy Dore for joining me.
Can I tell people?
Yes.
Ron and I will be September 18th in Burbank, California at Flappers Comedy Club doing a live Jimmy Dore show. And When are we in San Diego?
We're in San Diego, September 25th at the Comedy Palace, 8 p.m.
We'll see you there.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Stick around. Brett Ehrlich will join me for hour 2. It's the post-game show. Brett Ehrlich and Kim Horcher join me.
I think there's an interesting thing to be written or done about the logic of repealing EPA regulations, because that is baby killing.
Yeah.
Like, you're a baby killer. Like, everything you're doing is aborting babies. And you can go specifically to, like, Monsanto and pesticides that end up creating birth defects that abort babies. So, in a way, that is an abortion clinic that you're starting by repealing FDA regulations and EPA regulations.
That's right. But we know what they really mean when they say that they're pro-life.
Right, and that's the thing for me is, like, I'm tired of everyone speaking in code and rushing to, like, confirm their pre-existing biases. I just want them to tell me what they're actually pissed about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like with the things that we were talking about on one show, we're like, people are okay with Trump having his own private server.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you got mad at someone else for that.
her emails.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so, okay, it's fine. You know you're bullshit. I know you're bullshit. So tell me what you're actually mad about, because it's probably your dad.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably your mom and your dad, and that's why you're mad, and it's created this crazy shit from this probably very personal relationship you have with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, and you're angry and frustrated, and you're talking in strange codes and giving certain people passes and other people not. You read headlines and articles in this sprint to find some way to confirm what you already believe.
Yeah.
And you stop when you get it, and you don't read the end of it. Like, I get it, but tell me what you're actually mad about.
Okay, you know what? This is a good therapeutic exercise to close out the post-game show. Why don't we each state what we are the most angry about?
I'm the most angry about boycotts right now.
Oh.
Just like, boycott it, that thing's the worst. Like, if I were to get into a business right now, it would be litmus paper sales. Because everyone's like, litmus test on that, fuck you, boycott, delete.
Yeah.
And it's like, read the history of boycotts. Which ones are good and which ones are like, you weren't going to buy that shit anyway.
I am angry about willful ignorance. I am angry about throwing away data that we have applied intellectual power to for a reason. I am tired of the rejection of intellectualism, or deciding that intellectual people are elitist or somehow they think they're better than you. Maybe they are. They know things, and you should try to know things about something. Forcing yourself into the dark is never going to bring us forward. It's never going to end up with a positive result.
Hey, Jen, what's up?
Aaron, I forgot my email password. What is it?
EASSWORD.
an hour or two, my favorite hour of the show, especially when I'm not leading and I can just sit back, relax, let Brett take charge, and just comment, you know?
Yeah, that's great for you.
Just share my perspective.
Yeah.
You know, be the people's voice.
Good for you. You're so in the moment right now.
I am. I'm feeling really nice.
Good God. Good. I don't. Before we started, I did this thing where I shook my head to like get myself all excited. Now I'm a little dizzy. So if I pass out, just know that it's not a joke, and help me.
Okay.
If that happens.
I love doing the show with Brett.
Oh, that's great. He loves it back. And if he were here right now.
All right, real quick, let me do some TYT lives because there are some interesting tweets sent to us. Actually, first of all, Super Chat is YouTube comments. I don't know really how they differ from like the chat room next to the live stream, which is one of the worst places on the planet.
Right.
But somehow this comment came from a different place, and we like it. And so Chelsea Charles says, so if a cop yells at someone to drop your weapon, does that mean that they will be like, this isn't a weapon, it's a firearm? So it's a response to a story we did yesterday about how the NRA like aired a segment about how it's like defamatory to call a gun a weapon and that it should be called a firearm.
You don't want to hurt the firearm's feelings by calling it a weapon. Only the firearms can call each other weapons. You can't call them weapons because that's defamatory. They've reclaimed the word. These are a series of jokes I came up with for that.
That was good. That was very on the spot.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Ben Peck says, I work in local TV sports, constantly encouraged to show some personality, not be a robot, but stick to sports though.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing. When you're on the job and you're a sports reporter and you've been told by your company, stick to sports, that's fine. But if you are, you know, in your house and you have political opinions and you want to share them on Twitter and those political opinions happen to actually be political facts, then you should be able to share them.
And never more than, well, not never more than now. Frequently throughout history, sports has been in the same part of the Venn diagram as political discourse.
Right.
Is a very, especially racial discourse.
Absolutely.
So I think it's okay. And she is hired to have opinions.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, it's not like, excuse my language, but it's not like Jameel Hill was like, Trump's a little cunt boy, right? Like, that would be a little different because it's like, okay, but is that factual? Is he a cunt boy? Like, we don't know. There's no evidence for that. Just kidding. But what she said was, in my opinion, not that offensive. I think he's proud of his white supremacy.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's definitely not proud, and he might be today. We're actually going to start off with a story kind of about that. And for those of you who are watching, I took off my wedding ring because it's tight, and I'm learning how to wear it. I'll put it back on now.
Oh, you're married now.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that in the postgame.
That's the postgame today. Good call. All right. Congress just passed a bill urging President Trump to denounce white supremacy after Charlottesville. So, according to reports from BuzzFeed, the resolution, which rejects white nationalists, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, and other hate groups, urges Trump and his cabinet to use all available resources to address the threats posed by those groups. It also calls on the president and his administration to, quote, speak out against hate groups that espouse racism, extremism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. So that it also includes specific language about Heather Heyer, as well as the two police officers who were killed in the helicopter accident when they were responding to the violence in Charlottesville. Tuesday, Mark Warner, upon passing it, tweeted out, among others, tweeting about it. He said, tonight the House passed my resolution condemning hate groups and the Charlottesville attack. POTUS should send a clear message and sign it ASAP. Sarah Huckabee Sanders on Wednesday, which is today, did say that the president looks forward to signing it and absolutely will. However, this is the same president who said that there were, the exact quote is hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides.
On many sides. On many sides. That's what he said, yes. I'm glad that he's going to sign it. And, you know, it was a curious strategy by Congress to do this. I mean, on one hand, it's basically Congress saying, we do not support any of the, you know, white supremacist stuff that's popping up all over the place right now. We condemn it. We do not condone it. But I wonder if they were thinking maybe there's a possibility that Trump won't sign it, and it'll kind of throw him in the middle of this terrible controversy again, and maybe he'll lose a little more political capital. Although I feel like the more terrible racist stuff that goes on in the country, the more his core base, not all of his supporters, but his core base seems to continue making excuses for him, and they back him even more.
Right. It's remarkable for Congress as a whole to outflank anyone on what seems, on at least its face, to be a morally good thing to do.
Yeah.
Because Congress, as the president always said, Congress people, they have a lower approval rating than me. For them to just say, and then there's another part of it that's them just saying, okay, here's how to president. When things like this happen, say what you will negatively about Congress people, but this is the kind of thing they at least know how to do to, during a tough time, kind of signal to everyone, we want us all to come together over this.
Do you guys remember what controversies were like during the Obama administration?
No.
Do you remember when he wore a tan suit once and everyone made a big deal about that? Can we go back to those days?
Dijon mustard on a hot dog, that scandal.
Dude, I can't, it blows my mind. Those were scandals back in the day.
It was
Lock him up. Lock him up.
By the way, Dijon mustard's delicious.
Absolutely.
And should be placed on a hot
Just
dog.
call it deli mustard.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
It was onion because then it's sounds too foreign for Dijon. The Between Two Ferns thing that Obama did. I watched, it was random. I went through old archives. Fox News, at one point they said how unpresidential of him to do a comedy skit to try and push out air. I was like, this is unpresidential?
Yeah.
To try and have some kind of fit. Anyway,
he was trying to get people to sign up for health care. He was trying to tell them how to do it.
He's tricking them. He's tricky Brzezicki. I'm a Jimmy Dore this real fast. So is this officially a bill? Is this a law? Does they have to do something? There was the long list of things they're supposed to do with this thing that Trump is supposed to sign about white supremacy and then monitor this and do that. Right? I don't know if we can go through those things again. I don't know if that's still readily available. I just want to see a few of them.
They reject white nationalists, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, etc., and it urges Trump and his cabinet, so it urges an official urge to the Trump cabinet to use all available resources and to address the threats posed by those groups.
What's all that mean?
Yeah, what does it mean exactly? So are they going to finally empower the Department of Homeland Security to have a team that specifically focuses on right-wing non-Muslim extremism in the country? By the way, that's not to say don't focus on Muslim extremism. We are focusing on that. We should, but there's also right-wing extremism in the country, which has been evidenced by, various events that have transpired over the last year. Can we finally have a government organization allocating resources to investigating that?
Well, that would be nice. Set up by Congress. This urges ostensibly things within the cabinet. So it's saying, okay, cool. Why don't you need to do this? We urge you. So it's an official urge. And you don't want to know what it feels like to have Congress urge you. And then it continues an official calling on the president to speak out. So he got called on, and I don't know if anyone went to elementary school, but when you get called on by the teacher, that's serious.
No, it's crazy that we need Congress to
so they're urging him to sign this thing that they ask him to maybe do something like change his tone and call out white supremacists or just hate groups in our country in general. So this is nothing. It's a whole bunch of nothing. So it's a policy to cover for his ass. So our president signed this thing, so he now officially denounces white supremacists because they couldn't get him to do it on his own. So it's them saying, okay, so in the history of things, 10 years down the road, we can say, oh, you remember President Trump signed this decree that he's supposed to not like white supremacists anymore after he said how much he loves them? This all it is a little bit of cover so they can say he did something right. When honestly, how's he going to turn down? And what's he really going to do? Nothing.
Well, he's going to sign the bill on many sides. The front, and then he's going to turn it over and sign it on the other of the many sides of admonishment.
And then you got to do the important final part of this whole thing that he does.
What is that?
When he shows his signature.
Oh, he goes, well, I don't want people to know how I signed myself. I'm about to get that iPhone 10, and I don't want it to be give away my face. or my signature, but it's so Donald Trump. Road name good. My name, Donnie.
Okay. By the way, just to answer my own question that I posed about the Department of Homeland Security, the legislation does urge Jeff Sessions and the Department of Homeland Security to allocate resources to investigate right-wing extremism in the U.S. So,
urges them.
but it's non-binding, so I keep that in mind too.
That's free for Jeff Sessions because he knows where they are. You know,
Forces them to every time he walks by and nudge him with a double. Hey, remember? That's what it does.
All right.
Perfectly round head. Okay, let's move
on in the world.
A woman allegedly shot a homeless man after he asked her to move her Porsche. That's the story we're doing next. 26-year-old Katie Quackenbush, as reported by BuzzFeed News. Katie Quackenbush, who describes herself as a honky-tonk rock and roll singer from Texas, outlaw country, was in her car with a female passenger when she got into a confrontation with Gerald Melton near Music Row in Nashville on October 26th. So according to the report, Melton, a 54-year-old homeless man, quote, was trying to sleep on the sidewalk at 3 a.m. when he became disturbed by exhaust fumes and loud music coming from a Porsche SUV, police said in a press release. So after that, it seems like it's a disputed case over what happened, but the police say that after the argument, she shot him and then left the scene. Her father, who is also her lawyer, disagrees. According to her father, quote, she warned him to stay away and told him she had a gun. She then fired a warning shot, but he kept coming, so he fired another, quote, warning shot, he said. He said that his daughter and her friend, quote, had no clue that she had hit Melton, which is why they drove away and went to eat breakfast later. So, the full story also includes statements from the father that say that that Melton was actually an aggressive person, as noted by multiple businesses around the area, but he had not actually been charged with anything, nor had any official complaints been filed, according to the report. And however, for Quackenbush, the daughter, that is not the case. She has 2 misdemeanor assault charges against her in the past. One, quote, in December, she was charged with misdemeanor assault causing bodily injury in Texas for allegedly striking a woman in the head with a drinking glass, which her father downplayed as actually she saw the new girlfriend of her ex-husband, and they got in an argument, and she resorted to violence.
Is her father like her official press person?
He's her lawyer,
oh, okay.
Mr. Quackenbush, but she's pretty outlaw country.
Okay. Well, this is unfortunate, and look, we don't know exactly how it went down, and, you know, you do have businesses in the area saying that this homeless person is somewhat aggressive, and, you know, to be quite honest with you, there's a growing problem in the country of, first of all, the homeless population. It's exploded over the last few years, and also homeless people who have severe mental disabilities and need help, but we don't help them, we ignore them, and the problem will continue to grow, and we're going to continue pretending like it doesn't exist until we will be forced to address it. And so I don't know, no one knows exactly how it all went down there. Her record doesn't look good, but this is what happens, you know, when you live in a society that just arms anyone and everyone. By the way, is she legally in possession of a gun, considering the fact that she had criminal charges regarding assault?
It doesn't say in the reports I found whether she was convicted of the other misdemeanor charge was for assaulting her mother, but those charges were dropped. So she could have legally possessed the firearm, but according to the police report, the man did not impede her ability to leave the area.
Exactly.
It's a he said, she said in terms of what went down in the altercation. They said there was at first a non-physical interaction where he aggressively, according to her side, said racially charged epithets at her and was aggressive and was coming toward her, and she said go away. But the whole warning shot and not knowing what happened, I don't know, but you know, that's all speculation. But this is a good opportunity to bring up issues like how difficult it is when you have people who, by whatever circumstance, rendered them homeless, and a lot of them are in need of mental counseling. And in the court, it's difficult because there's a lot of times not enough resources, or legal authority for the prosecution and the legal system to actually mandate that these people who need mental counseling go get mental counseling.
Yeah. If you're an adult and you might have a mental health condition, it is hard to, you're an adult, so it's actually kind of difficult to force that individual to go get the help that they need. But I think the bigger problem is the fact that people can't afford mental health care. And the issue of mental health care comes up specifically when there's a mass shooting and people want to use that excuse as the scapegoat for that shooting. They don't want to talk about gun legislation. They just want to find another thing to blame. And it is a real problem. And we need to give Americans the health care that they need, and that includes physical health care and mental health care, so they don't end up in terrible positions like this. And also, we need to address affordable housing. Like, housing has become so incredibly out of reach for so many people. And what are we going to do? I mean, if you're retired, you're an elderly individual who's living in a rent-controlled apartment, and some developer buys that apartment building, decides to demolish it, and build luxury condominiums, what does that person do? Are you going to tell them to go back to work if they're on a fixed income? And we're seeing that problem play out over and over and over again. So again, I'm going to bring up, the imagery of us building moats around our homes and pretending like this problem doesn't exist, but it exists, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, it's difficult. Nashville had been going through, and continues, I assume, to be going through a major housing boom. They talk about all the cranes in Nashville for building up everything, and there's like an app online where you can go and count and see where all the cranes are because they're just everywhere, and they're going up haphazardly. There's one skyscraper in Nashville that they put too close to this one other skyscraper that has like a bright neon red sign. So those ones are always in front of a bright red flashing neon sign because they couldn't do anything about it. Anyway,
sounds really smart.
Has nothing to do with this story, but I feel like the online version of that story ended a little bit ago, so let's just move on to the next one.
All right.
Quackenbush. I don't know. Central California's got some quackenbushes.
She's a honky-tonk woman.
Outlaw country. I'd rather listen to Wheeler Walker Jr. personally. Go look him up. He's fantastic.
All right, we got to take a quick break. During that break, you can go ahead and look that person up. And then when we come back in about 5 minutes, more great stories for you, including what, Brett? What can they look forward to?
A prosecutor or a defense attorney in Missoula, Montana, referred to a 13-year-old victim of sexual assault as a temptress.
That's great.
Also, what license plate? Find out what license plate a DA, district attorney in Texas, tried to get before he was forced not to because it was a little weird, and as well as his second option wasn't too good either. So stick around.
All right, so stick around. Use the hashtag TYT Live to tweet to us. We'll be right back.
The United States economy has never been better. Monetary policy is spectacular. Everybody thought Jamie Dimon was the king of Wall Street last week. Well, it might be Ken Lewis from now. He takes the crown. The best salesforce out there is Merrill Lynch, and now it goes to BNA. It's pretty amazing. Lewis from now.
Buying opportunity. I do think this is a buying opportunity. We're going to see a stabilization and just a tremendous snapback.
The rally will be jaw-dropping. The Occupy Wall Street movement is not a spontaneous protest against economic inequality. This is what we mean by the establishment press. It is a well thought out campaign to bring down the infrastructure of this country. The embarrassment is that I'm given credibility in this world because of the disappointment that the public has in what the news media does. I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I learned a little bit about the cost of war. What the president is trying to do, and I agree with him, is to do everything that we can without going to war. So what do you say to your critics? I'm talking about Democratic critics who say, you know what, he's really just a socialist pacifist.
I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sake.
Most analysts are saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win in a landslide.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
I got Trump at 279, 259.
Wait a minute.
I know you don't believe that.
We're not going to be polite anymore. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight back. Fight for a free and independent media. We're done with politeness. We fight back. We are going to put together the best investigative reporting team in the country. You like Jordan Chapman in the field, challenging Democrats? He's the one that took down Donald Brazil. Thank God for that.
I'll give me 10 Jordan Chapmans. Look at the damage I could do.
TYT will give you the 4 horse, and we will let them gallop. Help unleash real journalism in the country. We don't need anybody else anymore but you guys. TYTnetwork.com/go. This is going to be amazing.
To watch the post-game show today because
let's just start it now.
It's gonna be so good and so juicy, and I'm gonna get myself into trouble. But JR just posed the question during the break: have you ever found a foreign hair in your home, and what was your reaction? Meaning the hair of another woman, in my case, in my home, and whatever, vice versa.
Yeah,
we gotta talk about it post-game. It's just
did you get it? If I wouldn't notice a hair of another man, but she would notice the hair of another woman.
Absolutely.
My male friend has really long, beautiful black hair. So we'll talk about that.
Okay, we'll talk about that and more post-game.
I swear he does, sweetheart.
TYTnetwork.com/join if you want to become a member. Gabby Marita says, how ridiculously fucking entitled must you be to have the audacity to shoot someone, then go eat breakfast like everything's fine?
That's what JR was saying.
We just talked about that.
What did you say?
So, if you're into a fight with someone, we're in a shoving match. He may be a little bit jarred afterwards and go, oh man, isn't that crazy? This bastard tried to shove me. When you go shoot someone, the calmness you have to be like, okay, Pops, let's go have the eggs, bacon on the side. Didn't just shoot someone. Wouldn't you be like a little startled? I'm gonna go home and sit down for a second and make sure nobody calls the cops on me.
I'll say stuff
She was
on.
angry.
I'll,
That was our executive producer's joke, Irina Nikita. That was hilarious.
so good. But I'll say stuff on this show that I regret pretty much every time, and then I'll not have an appetite for a couple hours. I'll just be like, oh God, I feel really terrible about
Same.
that.
Same.
What else do we got? Any other business you want to do?
Yes. Worldcraft says, bullshit. She knows she shot him. You know, if you shot someone, she didn't give a shit. Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know why, but I was needlessly overly fair in that story. But yeah, she sounds like a terrible person. I think that she knew, and I don't think that she felt like she was in imminent harm's way or he was an imminent threat. You have the Porsche SUV. Get in your Porsche SUV and leave. That's what you would do. One time when I was running in West Hollywood, there was a homeless man who was very clearly mentally unstable, running toward me with a belt. He was swinging his belt with a heavy object at the end, tied to the end of it.
Yikes.
He was very clearly coming toward me with that weapon to hurt me. And I ran in the other direction and lost him. I didn't shoot him, right? Look, I don't know. Anyway, let's just move on.
Let's move on to Missoula, Montana. A Missoula, Montana defense attorney referred to a 13-year-old victim of sexual assault as a temptress. Okay, how did it all start? The Missoulian reports, according to court documentation, Justin Griffith, 26, worked as a clinical care worker at Western Montana Addiction Services. So this is an addiction recovery place for teenagers, where he, quote, developed a sexual relationship with a 13-year-old patient in March of 2015. Griffith later told a detective that relationship lasted for a weekend. Lisa Kaufman, the defense attorney for Griffin, said Kaufman alleged there was a wild atmosphere. She seemed to blame it on the wild atmosphere at the treatment center with teenage girls who, quote, acted out sexually. She said Griffith had not received any training for how to handle such situations. And then later, over the prosecutor's repeated protests, here's what happened per the Missoulian. She said, she looks and acts like she's 18 years old, Attorney Lisa Kaufman told Missoula District Attorney Judge Dusty Deschamps. You should see the pictures of her and the hair and the makeup. And then later, in a heated exchange with the prosecutor, she said, how about victims as temptresses? What do you think about that? The victim's mother, who was seated behind the attorney, told Kaufman not to speak about her child that way. I was just making a little slam, Kaufman told her. About my daughter, the woman replied. And then after that, Kaufman apologized. But
so Lisa Kaufman is an embarrassment to not just women, to humanity, because she thinks that it's okay to point to a 13-year-old child, okay, and essentially blame her for being taken advantage of as she was in a rehab clinic trying to get clean, and a 26-year-old guy took advantage of her. So, yeah, you're a terrible person, and you shouldn't be an attorney. If that's the... Like, I get it. If you're a defense attorney, you are going to find any and all ways to try to defend that person, because that's your job.
Right.
But I believe that you can do your job without being incredibly insulting to the victim who was just taken advantage of. Calling her a temptress? Like, what are we? Are we like in, like an ISIS camp somewhere where, you go ahead and you blame the female victim who was just raped or sexually assaulted? I mean, do you want to put women in burqas? Is that what you like? Like, that's insane. You should see her makeup and the way she dresses. So are you saying, A, that men can't control themselves when they see an attractive woman, which is insulting to men, and B, that women who present themselves in a certain way deserve to be sexually assaulted or raped?
I don't know how...
What is her thinking here?
Like, I get that if you're a defense attorney, like you said, you have to say some stuff. And what's sad is what this does to the victims in these cases. And that's why you hear time and time again how difficult it is for victims to come forward, because not only once it's out there do people know, and then they're looking at you as the victim of one of these things, but also the process of defending the accused is to say that it was the victim's fault, to say that she brought it on herself. the best line of this all, and it's weird to call it the best line, but it was super accurate from the judge in response to the idea that this girl was a temptress and that the defendant had a lack of training in this area. The judge said it's hardly a training issue not to have sex with a 13-year-old.
Absolutely. Good.
It's just so obvious in that case.
So you want a drug rehab place to spend resources to train grown-ass men about how it's unlawful to sleep with 13-year-olds who are trying to get clean at said drug rehab center? Like, you think that makes sense? He's 26 years old. He's not a child. Okay?
Yeah. And
that's absurd.
It's so ridiculous. And then how much further do you need to go than just that one line? Do you need to then have them come into, okay, we're going to do the training for this. We dressed a 13-year-old girl up as a temptress, and you have to resist her for the next 20 hours. It's just like, just don't have sex with 13-year-olds. So that's pretty done with your training.
Let's put this method of defense, or apply this method of defense in a different context, and see how ridiculous it is. So I'm walking home, I see a car, and someone has left their laptop, their MacBook Pro, on the passenger seat.
Right.
Okay, the car is locked, but I see the computer, and since it's right there in plain sight, I decide I'm going to break the window, break into the car, steal the computer. I get caught. Do you think it's a good defense for me or my lawyer to say, well, you know, the victim here decided to leave the computer in plain sight, and as a result, the victim is to blame? No, that's absolutely ridiculous. The person who has committed the crime is the criminal, okay? The person who steals the laptop, in this case it would be me, I would be the criminal.
But then again, you didn't have enough training on how not to steal a laptop.
I mean, it just gets more and more absurd when you apply it to any other context.
I wasn't trained on how not to break a window and steal other people's property. I didn't get that in walking down the street training.
It's crazy.
Common sense. To follow up on what happened, a second count of sexual intercourse without consent was dropped as part of the guilty plea process, and the judge essentially said, listen, if I were to imagine one situation in which I could show some kind of understanding of the other guy's situation, or the 26-year-old Justin Griffith situation, would be if he was inexperienced and then we had an older but still minor personality disorder or something like that. But she's like, the judge said, this guy's been around the block. And he seemed like a predator. So 20 years was what he was sentenced to. 16 of those suspended.
Oh my God! I was gonna say, damn, 20 years.
So it's 4 years. The judge recommends sexual offender treatment during the suspended portion. I don't know if the sentencing's gone through, but this is like the apparent compromise between what was suggested by the parole counselor and what the judge came down with was a recommendation of sexual offender treatment during the suspended portion of the sentence, but the judge said there's no way I'm going to suspend the whole thing like the defense suggested. Right. So
all right,
that's that. Goodness. This next story, different. It's a different story. That's why we're doing a transition between the previous story and this story. This is the transition that we're doing. It's not a good one, but it's happening.
What am I going to do with you, man?
The Texas DMV made a district attorney change his vanity license plate because it was found to be inappropriate. So this district attorney had what license plate? Let's take a look at it. Hang'em. H-A-N-G, Texas outline, E-M. On his license plate, apparently District Attorney Richard Glazer of Fannin County had this license plate for 35 years and said it was inspired by Clint Eastwood's film Hang'em High. He explains what happened and why he had it. He said, it really sort of fits what I do. It harkens back to frontier justice. If I'm out on the road, people drive by, give me a thumbs up or clap or something like that. I guess the people in Austin have a little different sense of humor. Hang'em is is hanging people, and that's not. I don't like that. I don't like hanging people. So yeah, that's what happened. And this all started when someone had inquired as to why their own license plate got rejected by the DMV for being inappropriate, And then they added in their complaint after their own license plate was suspended. He said, how can the district attorney of Fannin County have hang 'em and that not be threatening? Just wondering. And so the DA saw that someone was complaining about him, went back, did like a Freedom of Information Act to find out what the true context was. And then finally, after it all went down and his own hang 'em was rejected, he decided to come up with a second option. So, according to the report, Glazer said he then changed the text of his plates to geldum, a nod to castration. So geldings are castrate horses. But those were found to be objectionable as well. That denial was a bit more of a shocker to the twice-spurned district attorney. He said, I guess that there's people down in Austin that probably make a pretty good salary that decide stuff like this. So that's that.
You are a district attorney. Okay, so you are supposed to be part of a justice system, and you are supposed to present yourself as an individual who supports and wants to reinforce justice. Wanting to castrate people, wanting to hang people, implies that you are not necessarily interested in justice. You're interested in punitive, extremely punitive measures, and that is what your main focus is, and it's unprofessional to say the least. So I'm glad that you got denied. I'm sorry that you had that license plate for 35 years and it went unnoticed, but it's incredible. I mean, we just had a conversation earlier in the show about how an ESPN host said that Trump is a white supremacist on Twitter, and people are losing their minds over it because it's the truth. But in the case of a district attorney, someone who is supposed to be part of a justice system that's supposed to be fair, has these license plates or suggests a license plate that's even worse. I mean, that's not offensive. Yeah. I mean, again, he's supposed to carry out justice. He's supposed to be part of that system, and it seems like he's much more interested in killing people or castrating them.
There was a different story we covered a couple weeks ago, and there was a tweet, and I forget who it was, but they said something that, what is it with the law enforcement person who wants to be famous for weird stuff like this? You know, like the Arpaio, let's go above and beyond how cruel we're going to be, and accentuate the like terrible part, the punishment side of it. And I don't know, it's possible. I'm not too bothered by it personally. Like the hang 'em, it's a Western thing. It's more of a frustration, but like there's a story in the New York Times today about an Ottawa judge who was suspended because after Trump got elected, he wore a Make America Great Again hat to the courtroom after that.
Okay, well, that's
and
great.
The conclusion was, and this is why I come back around to being like, all right, you're a law enforcement official, rather than picking up the hang 'em mantle, let's focus more on the fairness.
That's right.
Mantle. And they said, like, what would a reasonable person assume if they walked in and saw you with this?
That's right. Yeah.
And if it's hang 'em, it seems to imply that you don't care
about justice.
You just care about hanging people.
That you want punishment, and the emphasis is the punitive component of the justice system, not the fairness, not the innocent until proven guilty. Look, as a district attorney, you have such an incredibly important job, and I think the way you present yourself matters.
Yeah.
And so, look, this is not me like getting my feelings hurt. This is me reacting to another symptom of a justice system that has wronged so many people. So many people have dealt with, convictions for crimes that they did not commit. So many people were on death row and were exonerated after DNA evidence indicated that they did not commit the crime. We spoke about the Central Park Five earlier in the show today. Those were 5 individuals, black individuals, who lost years of their lives over a crime that they did not commit. And so it's never just about that one story. For me, when I see something like this, it's not just about this one district attorney and this one license plate. It's about what it represents. It's a symptom of an unjust justice system in the country that we really need to focus on, and we really need to reform. That's what it says to me.
We'll ask the guy to think about it. Just one second. It's your license plate. I mean, first of all, whatever happened to MD for my love or some whatever sappy things people put on their license plates? And if they don't allow you to put hang 'em on it, say you didn't even have that in your mind. It's about some Western. You can survive. Move on.
Right.
Okay. hang them. Big deal. Who cares? Okay, move on. Put a sign in front of your house or something. I don't know. Put it in your room and gaze at it. Why do you need one behind you driving to say, "Oh, tough guy, hang him"? Right. You'll survive. Move on past the hang him. It's okay.
He finally settled on DA 336 will be his
All right, nice.
district attorney, and then the code for that location. So that is DA 336. If you see him,
that's an adult's license plate. That's what an adult has.
But if I do see it, if I'm behind it, I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. All right.
Okay, just real quick, I hate like the fancy license plates. Like just
vanity plates.
Grow the fuck up, okay? Like,
what?
By the way, like some of them are cute, whatever. I know I'm being a total grump about this, but it's just like. Anyway, let's move on.
He could have done hang 'em high.
Like I know, like,
and then it would have been HI, and it would have been like hang 'em high, and it would be friendly at the end. Hi.
Well, hands now. They added the hands in California. There's a hand symbol. You can put symbols on your license plates now too. So if you have a little kid thing, you're like,
Why? How do people have time for this? How? I want to know how people have time.
They don't actually make the plates.
You have to apply for it though. Like you have to take time out of your busy life to apply for a custom.
If you can go to Amazon and order some laundry detergent.
But I need laundry detergent. It is an essential part of life.
The only reason I would be okay with a DA having hang 'em on his license plate is if underneath it was a bunch of truck nuts. Then it would be like, oh, hang them.
But that's
hang the trunk nuts. And then geld them if he got rid of the truck nuts. Or the truck, just as long as...
both, you can have both. You're making a statement about nuts.
Yeah, I guess I'm alright if you just have truck nuts. Just buy truck nuts.
Are you okay with truck nuts, by the way?
Yeah, I think it's funny.
Every time I see truck nuts. One time I saw blue truck nuts, and I was like, this is the best truck nuts I've ever seen. I love truck nuts. It's really fucking funny. And I don't know why it amuses me, but I think everyone who gets in trouble for truck nuts,
People get in trouble for truck nuts?
Well, people give them shit. They go, oh man, look at this douchebag with his truck nuts hanging.
I got kids here.
You know the truck nuts are like steel balls, and they're swinging in the back of a truck?
Well, but like, what I want to know is, like, why?
Because it's an explicit acknowledgement that your truck is a compensation for a small bag of genitals. The unit for genitals is a bag, apparently. And it's funny because nuts is with a Z. Nuts. Like nuts. Like it's colloquial. Like truck nuts. I think it's with a Z. Look up, do some fact checking on the show today and let me know if it's truck nuts with a Z. I like it.
Because people have a little bit of fun. Just like it hangs up in their
The kids are like, yeah. But people are like, no, you can't have truck nuts. I can't have my kids thinking the trucks can procreate. I don't want to have them talk about the birds and the bees and the trucks.
Here's when shit really hits the fan. When we have like car boobs, right? Because we gotta conceal the nipples. We gotta conceal the titties.
Yep.
You cannot show
There's already bras. Back in the 80s.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There were bras.
This is madness. Okay.
All right. Speaking, we want to do more madness. What do you want to do?
Let's do more madness.
The Christian school or the?
We have like 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we do one.
You want to do that or the bodegas?
Whichever one you feel more passionately.
All right, let's just do the Christian school because I'm going to make an Eddie Izzard reference later, and I want to. Okay. English parents are suing a Christian school over the fact that a boy was allowed to wear a dress to school. The unnamed school was complained about by Nigel Rowe and his wife Sally. They removed their 6-year-old son from the unnamed school after a male classmate was allowed to attend the primary school in a dress. So, as a result, the couple are going to mount a legal challenge against the school, arguing it has not respected their rights to raise their children in line with their biblical values. So they're going to homeschool the kids. Nigel, the father, said, "We believe it is wrong to encourage very young children to embrace transgenderism. Boys are boys and girls are girls. And gender dysphoria is something that we as Christians need to address with love and compassion, but not in the sphere of a primary school environment." If you're wondering what the school's rule is, it's Church of England school. It says the school in question said transgender pupils were protected under the Equalities Act of 2010 and that it had policies in place to tackle transphobic behavior. It defined transphobia as including a failure to use a person's adopted name or to accept he or she was a real boy or girl. There you go.
Okay, so the law protects the school and its decision to allow these students to dress in the way that they identify with. And So if you want to sue them, have at it. We'll see how that plays out in court. But it's this extra unnecessary, like just completely superfluous step of suing the school because you're uncomfortable having a conversation with your child about why another student might want to wear a dress. By the way, you want to support biblical values. Jesus is always depicted wearing a dress. Like, always.
I think we have photos.
Yeah, so...
starting with P1.
Let's just take a look at these pictures because I don't see any jeans up in here. Oh, there's Jesus. It looks like his resurrection or something. He's not wearing pants. In fact, no one's wearing pants. There's Jesus again. He's wearing a lovely crimson dress. Okay. Are we offended by this? Do we need to sue the individuals who illustrated Jesus Christ wearing a dress? Look,
That's a good number. I like the contrast.
Mm-hmm. Here's what you can do. If you are confronted with a situation where your child wants to know why a little boy would want to dress like a little girl. Son, sometimes individuals are born with a gender that they don't identify with. That's it.
Mama, what does identify mean?
You then explain what identify, like have a conversation with your kids, because here's what's not going to happen. If your child was born as a boy or a girl and they identify as a boy or a girl, you don't have to worry about them miraculously changing their gender identity because other students are doing it. The world doesn't work that way. Okay? And I think that, and I'm not trying to be too judgmental of them, because I think that this type of fear really comes from ignorance and this notion that if you accept a certain group of people, then individuals are going to make decisions about their gender identity or their sexuality. It doesn't work that way. And even if it does, and it doesn't, but even if it does, who cares? Are you going to love your son any less? And if you really are worried about that, then take your son out of the school and move on with your life, because the law protects what this institution did.
I'm with the Church of England on this. I said I was going to make an Eddie Izzard reference. I love the Church of England. I mean, first of all, the Church of England was set up so that your king could get a divorce. So if you want to be like strict in line with all that stuff, to my knowledge, as my remembering through Eddie Izzard bits, it was so he can get a divorce. Also, he also characterizes it as like there's no arms in the church. There's no bones in the arms of Church of England. They're very like, do whatever you want. It's like the Spanish Inquisition would never have happened because they're so lax. It's like, do you renounce it? And then they'd be like, but it's too tight. And the Church of England would be like, all right, well, just loosen it up. It's fine. It's Church of England. Go ahead. Take her death. Anyways, I think no one got that reference but me.
Yeah.
3 people watching Eddie Izzard. But yeah, you have kids, JR. You have a kid.
Yeah.
How do you handle this kind of stuff?
Well, I haven't had to. It's pretty. The kid does what he wants. He wears what he wants, and that's the way it'll work. So I'm not. People can do what they want with their kid as long as they're not abusing their child. Other than that, just let it go. Let other people do their kids.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah.
I think it's better than punishing kids for expressing themselves in a way that doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, look, everyone, as long as you're not hurting your child, raise your kid however you'd like to raise your kid. But don't go ahead and sue a school for following the law and not discriminating against certain students. All right, we got to go. If you're a member, stick around. There will be a post-game show. Thank you to Brett Ehrlich and J.R. Jackson for hour 2. You guys are awesome. We love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.